How's it going, ladies and Bruce? I'm Sixkilla, welcome back to Sekimeiya. It's time for us to answer some more questions. Poorly, I might add. But you know, we're getting very close to the end here, which I'm excited to see how it all turns out, to be fair. Especially since we've put, you know, nearly 50 hours or something into the game now, so I'm invested. I'm invested, one way or another. Anyway, so the question for this one was, what was it? If I touch the Sekimeiya, I either think that I'll let go of the pen before the time expires, otherwise I won't have it. It won't appear with it. I won't appear with it. I would be instantly fading the pen out of existence, but I haven't actually get rid of it. Even though I should appear with it, I wouldn't. This is what happened to, well, all of these things, I suppose. The cleaning cart's almost, because the cleaning cart stopped existing entirely, right? It just disappeared. The knife teleported to other places. I don't know, Shidoya's phone I think moved as well, but the cleaning cart just disappeared entirely. But we're probably wrong. The cleaning cart disappeared when Shidoya travelled to the future because she didn't have it in the past, so it would have been impossible for her to appear with it. But on January 5th, when she travelled to the past, to December 15th, she noticed that out of the things she'd been holding, only her phone had disappeared. She didn't think about it, but the Shin card did as well, and her clothes had changed. Why? She appeared in the lobby of the tower, and the future coordinate was January 26th. I'm sure you haven't forgotten that phones are extremely prohibited in the tower, so she couldn't have been there with it in the future, so she appeared without it in the past. This is pretty insane. I can't believe the mechanics actually followed some rules. I was overwhelmed by the number of things I was learning, but I didn't want to focus on a single detail. I didn't know if anyone else would come back at some point, but there were plenty of things I was wondering about. How much can I figure out with what I know? Was Sai aware of all this? He had a wristwatch, so I bet it would have been a lot easier for him to learn some of it. There were 2 Sekimeiya since this morning, but what about the third one? Does that one never work? And one made us travel back in time while the other sent us forward. If I know that the time someone appeared in the future, I can know that's where they were in the past. There are many ways to apply all of this. I wonder if, when someone travels to the past, I think that I'll bring them somewhere in the future. Will I make them appear there in the past? Could the origin be in my mind even though I'm not the one traveling? I tried to calm down a bit and went to the kitchen. It's better to answer with the larger questions first. Wait a second, I can duplicate anything obtainable, can't I? I wonder whether duplicating the Sekimeiya is possible, but it doesn't appear to be the case. When it's activated, it doesn't count as something you possess and it stays behind. What if you're holding the other one though? Now I'm certain that Sai with the broken wristwatch had come from the future, and he had a Sekimeiya in his hip pack. He acted as if he didn't know it had been there, so perhaps that was the truth. And maybe he appeared with it. An important detail was that it was inactive. If in the future he had a powered off Sekimeiya in his hip pack, it's possibly appeared with in the past. Trying it should have been simple. First, I used the past Sekimeiya to travel 9 seconds to the past. In the living room I waited 18 seconds before I re-entered the kitchen. The Sekimeiya will now spend a little while powered off. I took the future Sekimeiya at the refrigerator and grabbed the disabled past Sekimeiya. Half a minute later, I left it on the countertop and touched the future Sekimeiya. I appeared in the kitchen 9 seconds to the future, then I glanced at my hands. The past Sekimeiya was there. I'm gonna try that. It was there, still grey. I had it in my hands. Did I really duplicate it? I looked at the marble, where I'd left the past Sekimeiya before travelling. Wait, it's not there. The future Sekimeiya was where I touched it, and it was grey. That proved I travelled to the future, however the original past Sekimeiya was gone. I hadn't duplicated it. What the hell? Can the Sekimeiya not be duplicated? And it seems like the original one disappeared when I appeared with it in the future, and disallowed the duplication. There's no way anyone came and took it during the 9 seconds I wasn't here, right? It was bizarre, but the fact that I've appeared with it was notable. It accounted as one of my past possessions. While I was thinking, the past Sekimeiya powered on. It's still working. I wonder if the fact that it was powered off mattered at all. I repeated the same process, but held the past Sekimeiya with my sleeves for half a minute. Then, I left it in the refrigerator to avoid overlapping ranges and went 9 seconds to the future. I didn't appear with the Sekimeiya. My hands looked to be holding something that wasn't there. I opened the refrigerator and saw the past Sekimeiya where I just left it. So, it did matter that it wasn't active. When it isn't, its powers fade temporarily and it acts as a normal object. What would happen if I did the reverse of this? Wouldn't the past change? If I go to the past holding the powered off future Sekimeiya, I would appear with it in the past, so the original one would disappear. That means that I couldn't hold it anymore when I'm travelling to the past if I change it. I tried it out of curiosity. Holding the future Sekimeiya that I powered off, I went 9 seconds to the past. In the living room, however, I didn't have the future Sekimeiya between my hands. didn't work. I thought that I would stay here for 18 seconds with the Sekimeiya, so that's strange. Suddenly, I heard a sound coming from the kitchen. It scared me at first, but I immediately understood what it had been. 9 seconds later, I entered through the door. The disabled Sekimeiya was on the floor. It hadn't disappeared alongside my past self. Why though? I don't get it. Wait, no, I might have an idea. Would it be paradoxical? I mean, it would be an infinite loop, wouldn't it? Let's go with that one. I think it's due to the infinite loop concept I thought of. If I'd appeared with the powered off future Sekimeiya in the past, 18 seconds later, it would have been closer to powering on. Once the infinite loop is applied, the Sekimeiya could have never powered off, and when it's powered on, it doesn't count as a normal object. I believe that's why it didn't travel. What the hell would happen if I wait in the middle of the living room for a few seconds, move the sofa to where I'd been standing, and then travel to the future? My appearance would collide with the sofa. But what exactly would happen? Would I overwrite part of the sofa? Would it cut off my legs and kill me? It's too risky to test that, but I have no idea what the result would be. After all, I've been appearing where there is air, and it seems I'm overwriting it, or else it would also kill me. The case might be different if I appear on top of a solid object, though. This is what happened to... Isla? Isla or Naomi? I don't know which Isla. Come on, B. It's the fate Psi A meant. What happened to Psi A? I don't know any of the Psis died. In his world, he was the first person to leave room B4, in which everyone waited. After his departure, he never came back. He was never seen alive again. Unaware of what awaited him, he touched the future Sekimeiya that had been hidden in the attic. For a prolonged period of time, he'd been sitting against the door in the crystal room. However, when he appeared there in the future, the door had been opened. They only cut him in half, that's right. I've been figuring all of this out, but I still don't fully understand the most important aspect, the amount of time traveled. I've been repeatedly traveling 9 seconds through time, so it has to be consistent as well. 30 seconds stored equals 9 seconds traveled. 2 minutes stored equals 45 seconds traveled. There's already an indication. Each stored second turns into more amount of traveled time than the previous. In the first case, each stored second adds 0.3 seconds traveled. In the second case, each store added 0.37 seconds traveled. And it's evident that keeps going. 15 minutes stored leads to 20 minutes traveled. In that case, each stored second adds 1.3 seconds. Earlier, keeping the Sekimeiya at the cabinet for 25 minutes made me travel about 45 minutes in the past. That's a pretty noticeable increase. Each stored second would have counted for 1.8 seconds traveled. So the more time is gathered, the larger the increase is. It's exponential. The difference between 5 and 10 minutes is very little compared to the difference between 20 and 25 minutes. For a while, the numbers will be low, but there will be a point where they'll suddenly become immense. Once the Sekimeiya has been out of the cabinet for 35 minutes, how much will 1 second stored equal to? What about after an hour? There's an indication that I'm correct about this. Arcado and Shiroya, they travelled days through time, and so did I. Arcado said he touched the Sekimeiya while we were in the attic's bedroom, so it's very possible it had stored energy for a long time. In any case, the increase of time travelled is not gradual. However, I think something might be. The range. The range. That's what the travels indicate. Although I'm still confused by it, I believe it must work under a gradual increase. Otherwise, when Arcado and Shiroya travelled days through time, we would have travelled as well. There is something else that could follow a similar progression: the time it spends recovering. No matter the amount of time travelled, the Sekimeiya always spends a while grey. However, the amount of time stored seems to gradually add to the guaranteed amount. There's got to be a formula behind the amount of time travelled that every travel follows. What could it be? A formula that increases the amount each stored second adds as more seconds have passed. If I could figure it out, I could use the Sekimeiya to appear at any point in time. So it's like compound interest. If you can work out compound interest, you can work that out. Thankfully, if it doesn't change over time, I can do a small scale test to figure out what exactly would occur at a larger scale. Observing the difference between 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 and 35 seconds might be all I need to understand what an hour of stored time would cause. But my way to measure time isn't precise, and I can't measure decimals. I might need a calculator too, and I don't know if there's one here in the attic. Why was I so preoccupied with the idea? Was it due to mere curiosity? No, that wasn't all. At some point I'd realised it. While locked in the tower for 12 hours, I'd spent a long time trying to figure out if saving Mia was possible. And I knew, at that moment, that it was. However, those thoughts had all faded from my mind. Shiroya had caused me to abandon the idea of saving her. But I'd learned that hadn't been the real Shiroya. And it made a lot of sense. She would never have said that. She'd wanted to save Mia just like me, and had been prepared to do it once I had told her it was possible. Had I truly heard Mia earlier? That voice continued to replay in my head, but I couldn't understand the circumstances around it. I don't know how reasonable this is. After a while of storing time, being off by even a single decimal will result in a substantial difference. Even if I analyse repeated short travels to the future, it might take me a really long time to come up with an accurate equation for just these two timers. I had no idea how long I'd been alone in the tower for, but I couldn't afford to spend hours perfecting the formula. I didn't even know if it was consistent in the first place. My mind went back to a thought that I'd had long in the past. When I'd originally conceived a thought of thought-up loops, I'd also considered a particular scenario. Depending on how it works, the possibilities could be limitless. There's even a high step to reach. It's considerably different, but it follows along a few things I thought about earlier regarding the date displayed on Si's watch. Out of the countless examples, could you go back in time, trade information with someone, write it all down, and leave it on a note that you'd seen before travelling through time? You'd read the note and go back to the past. However, since you already know the contents of it, you have no reason to exchange the information. All you would do would be leaving behind the note that you'd read, so you could read it before travelling. The note itself would be a paradox that you caused. But was the past truly changed? Was the past in which you exchanged information truly overwritten, or did it never exist in the first place? If Si's watch got to 999-1231 by spinning infinite time in a loop, did the past in which the time counted up to that date really exist in any capacity? Would something like that actually be possible? I don't have the time needed to find an equation that lets me calculate time values for the Sekimeiya, but as long as it's possible to find, I could use something like this. Could I use something like this to obtain it? How long would it take me to find it? Maybe 2 hours of monitoring innumerable travels? If I extrapolate my old scenario to this, it would look something like going 2 hours back in time, spending them working to find the formula, and then noting it down on a piece of paper that I would hide inside a drawer. Before travelling 2 hours back, I'd find the note, and in the past, as I would already know the formula, I'd just have to write it down and leave it in the drawer. But this isn't applicable, because if I go 2 hours back, I won't have access to the Sekimeiya. I've been testing with them. So if I go back and use them, I'll be changing the past, and the note will not be written in my current reality. But what if I change it up a little? Let's say I take the past Sekimeiya out of the refrigerator. 2 minutes later I touch it and go 45 seconds back. I'm not even sure if this first travel would be needed, but it might be. Then 45 seconds later my original self will disappear, and I'll spend 2 hours testing with both Sekimeiya to come up with the right formula. Once I have it, I'll go back to a point before I travelled 45 seconds and write down the formula. Before travelling the 45 seconds, I'll read the note with the formula, then 45 seconds in the past I'll write it down so that my original self can see it. Would this allow me to spend 2 hours finding the formula without actually having to waste that time? There was no point in assuming an answer because it was easy to test. I readied myself to perform the loop and started to store time with the past Sekimeiya. However, when I looked at the drawer when I wanted the note to be hidden, it was empty. Okay, why did it not work? Success of the loop required the existence of hypothetical events. In reality, if I had seen the note, I would never have spent 2 hours working to find the formula. Those events would only have existed in a hypothetical history, as afterwards, once their result was known, their existence would have become unneeded. Am I mistaken then? Is this concept just unworkable? That can't be. It's the same thing as the recorder powering off when I go to the past. The hypothetical realities in which it progressively loses battery need to exist in order for it to appear without power in the real one. I didn't fully understand that though, as the recorder not degrading physically still didn't make sense to me. What if it didn't work because 2 hours wouldn't have been enough to determine the formula? Or what if during those 2 hours, people would have shown up and I would have been unable to continue and go to the past to leave the note behind? If 2 hours wouldn't have been enough, what about 10? What if it would have taken me more than 20 hours to refine the formula until it was consistent with every travel? The tower will open at 9 o'clock, so assuming no one else comes, even in a hypothetical world, I would only have until 9 o'clock to experiment. Actually, probably way less than that, because to travel to the past and appear in the tower, I'd have to be inside it hours after 9 o'clock. But assuming I had all the time I needed, would I be able to use the hypothetical world to my advantage? Could I make use of countless hours without actually spending any? I considered that there might have been a way to test it. I took the past Sekimeiya out and pressed play on the recorder. Then I went to the living room with the past Sekimeiya and the recorder and closed the door to the kitchen. I had to think very thoroughly about this. Instead of using a single hypothetical world, what if I used multiple at once by making it recursive? If I touch the Sekimeiya when 15 minutes have passed, I'll go 20 minutes to the past. But before I touch it, I'll open the door to the hallway and find a notepad from the bedrooms on the floor. Depending on what it says, I'll do one of three things. 1. If it has a formula written down, I'll go 20 minutes to the past, obtain the notepad, write the formula down and leave it in the hallway. 2. If I don't find a notepad, I'll go 20 minutes to the past, and using the future Sekimeiya in the kitchen, I'll start to work toward finding the formula. Before 20 minutes pass, I'll obtain a notepad from the bedrooms, and in the top left corner of the first page I'll write a 1, along with the progress I made in those 20 minutes, then I'll leave it in the hallway. 3. If I find a notepad that doesn't contain a formula, I'll have my current progress along with the number on the top left corner of the first page, which will indicate the amount of iterations that have occurred so far. I'll go back to the past and using the information I'll read in the notepad, I'll start working to find the formula. Before the 20 minutes pass, I'll write down the updated progress in a notepad from the bedrooms, increasing the number I saw in the top left corner by 1, and then leave the notepad in the hallway. This makes use of infinite time. By repeatedly using the 20 minutes across multiple hypothetical worlds, I can carry my progress over until the formula is found. If I'm able to compress years worth of calculations into a single 20-minute loop, then, since all the worlds will collapse into a final result, if the concept is viable, I'll always find the real formula behind the hallway door. Actions 2 and 3 are only for the hypothetical worlds. As another final point, if the number on the top left corner exceeds, say, 1 billion, then I can be confident that no answer exists. I realised the plan had a small flaw, but if in the real world I open the hallway door and find no notepad, I'll think that the plan hasn't worked and won't go through with the first loop. In the same way, the first hypothetical version of me, instead of assuming that he's about to start the first iteration, would assume the plan is flawed and wouldn't start the sequence. In other words, for the plan to work, if I go to the hallway right now and don't find a notepad, I'll have to execute the first loop. This is okay because even though the plan wouldn't work for me, I'll have to resort to trying to find the formula manually in the real world, so executing the first loop would work toward that and would make the plan succeed if the concept is viable. 13 minutes had passed. I hadn't heard anything in the attic. If another version of me had been ready to pass the formula on to me, he had been very quiet. Still completely clueless as to whether it would work, I approached the hallway. What? My mouth dropped to the floor. Flashes of a certain bedroom popped into my mind, a normal occurrence after seeing my own messy handwriting. A notepad was beside my feet, containing a large string of numbers on the first page. Upon closer inspection, it was definitely a formula, far from a clean one. This is really it. It actually worked. All the pages after the first one were completely empty. There was no number on the top left, so I didn't know how many iterations had been needed to reach it, but its complexity was evident. So Shiroi and Akito weren't lying. Touching the Sekimeiya after an hour of stored time would really send you weeks through time, and I can calculate the exact amount. Before that though, I have to travel to the past. Less than 20 seconds remain until the 15-minute mark. When the timer hit, I touched the past Sekimeiya. As expected, I appeared in the hallway right next to the kitchen, which was closed. I'd gone 20 minutes back, but the past Sekimeiya had only stored energy for 15. During the first 5 minutes, I had no access to the kitchen because my past self was there. In the hypothetical loops, the time would have been used to check the progress made until the previous iteration. I went to the right bedroom and took a notepad from the drawer. I recalled all the numbers that had been comprised the formula and wrote them down. Then I silently approached the hallway and left the notepad next to the living room. This is crazy. I wonder how much time was spent reaching this equation. Feels like an instant result from my real self. So I could even use something like this to brute force the computer passwords downstairs. I stood in silence until I heard my past self leaving the kitchen. The future Sekimeiya's in the refrigerator. I had a slight doubt. I understood the formula, but a certain factor wasn't part of it. Is that really it? Is there no other influential factor? I stepped over to the sink and set the plug for the drain. Then I filled it with water very slowly, so that I didn't make a noise. Once I reached the top, I took the future Sekimeiya out and put it in the water. I set the oven to count for 10 minutes. When only 5 had passed, I put my hand in the water and touched the Sekimeiya. I appeared in the kitchen and immediately saw the disabled future Sekimeiya under the water. Then I looked at the oven and saw the amount of time I'd gone in the future. The time was at 4:31, immediately ticking down to 4:30. 29 seconds. I've gone 29 seconds forward. So I was right, there is another factor. The temperature. If the water's at room temperature and the Sekimeiya spent 5 minutes in it, I should definitely have gone more than 29 seconds forward. But the heat capacity of water is 4 times the air's, meaning that it heats up 4 times slower. It appears a temperature higher than the cabinets let the Sekimeiya store energy and become hot. Of course, that heats up the air around it. Then, the same air makes the Sekimeiya even hotter, leading to an infinite increase of energy. That's why the water's different heat capacity changes things, because water heats up 4 times slower. Although the Sekimeiya spent 5 minutes in it, it's the same as if it spent 75 seconds outside of it. So only travelled 29 seconds. I'm sure the hypothetical version of me thought about this too when they were coming up with the equation, but it's not really part of it, it just modifies the result. Finally, this answers the last question regarding the time Edina touched the Sekimeiya. While we encompassed within the Sekimeiya's range, the Sekimeiya had spent 15 minutes outside the cabinet, and based on the previous identical travel, we should have been outside of it. Edina opened the glass and rolled the Sekimeiya into her purse, avoiding direct contact with it. That's why for those 15 minutes the Sekimeiya was in her purse. That led to the opposite effect that the water caused. The air inside the purse couldn't easily escape, so it heated up faster than outside it. That's the reason why the range was bigger. Inside, the only person who actually travelled through time must have travelled more than 20 minutes. I wonder how much of an effect this had on the travels. When the Sekimeiya was in the other cabinets, for example, did it heat up faster? Their interiors are wide, but I'm sure they must have been a very tiny difference. Maybe you noticed the instances where this property was a factor in play. Earlier, did you wonder why Shiroya world switched alongside Naomi? She was at the staircase while the Sekimeiya was on the sofa, and they'd recently been taken out of the cabinet. As you might guess, it was Katai's tight suitcase that let the Sekimeiya gain power faster than normal. That might be everything, although I could be wrong on the details that I can't verify. I can apply the time formula as long as I touch the Sekimeiya outside the water and in this room. The temperature in the attic doesn't feel different from everywhere else, but I should stay here. I heard myself in the living room stepping to the hallway. Soon after, that made me touch the Sekimeiya and went back in time. I retrieved the past Sekimeiya and the recorder and stepped back to the kitchen. I put both Sekimeiya in the refrigerator, then I took out the past Sekimeiya as I began a new recording. I moved to the hallway. I had appeared right outside the kitchen, so I had to be there in 20 minutes. By leaving the door open, I could make sure the future Sekimeiya was safe in the refrigerator. Is there anything else? Is there any mystery I can't explain? In the storeroom, I'd sporadically thought about the long series of events that had gone on during the 12-hour span of time. A few ideas had come to me, but I had to seriously think about everything with what I'd learned. At 9 o'clock, the smoke was released on the tower, beginning the attack that trapped us inside. What triggered the alarm? Was anyone aware of the Sekimeiya's powers? I'm still not sure about the details behind it, but it's a lot clearer now. While we were asleep, someone hid the Sekimeiya in room B4 and turned on the temperature regulation. Was it Naomi? In this world, she ran up to the attic with them. There's also Katai. He wasn't in the security room, and he must have been who dropped the rusty key in hallway A. Beyond the truth of the attack, the third Sekimeiya, the one that doesn't work, was the only one inside the cabinet when we woke up. When Isla touched it, nothing happened to it. We went to the security room and contacted the outside. That's when we heard the call with Tsurupo, who told us about the story behind Ashiya and Shin. Before it ended, Sai turned off the monitor next to him. However, immediately the whole computer went off too. Who did that and why? At that point, I believe there's an answer far more likely than the others. Pass. But, I guess I'm gonna go with Katai, right? Oh, fuck, I don't know. B? I think it was Katai, the person who was sitting in front of the computer. When it happened, we were about to look at the recorded footage. That would have revealed that he hadn't been in the security room, and who knows what else. He probably wanted to use Sai's trick to his advantage. We were all focused on the screen that had gone black, so nobody saw him pressing the power button below the desk. Due to his timing, he tried to make it seem as if both things had the same cause. The first thing he did was crouch under the desk and check the wires. He said nothing was wrong behind the computer, but I think that's what he did to disconnect the cable. Then when he repeatedly pressed the power button, the computer didn't turn on. However, he couldn't leave it like that. He explained what had happened to the police. They would immediately notice the disconnected cable, and no one would believe a word Katai said, so after he acted like he'd been trying to figure out the issue for a long time, he reconnected the cable, and the computer was able to power back on. I don't think that's all he did though. During all the time that he was below the desk, he unplugged the camera system from the computer. Later into the day, I realized the drive that stored the recording footage wasn't being detected. And even that wasn't all. We tried to communicate with the outside a second time, but upon inputting his credentials, an access denied message appeared. Why? I'm not completely sure why he would have done that, but he could have purposely entered incorrect password to prompt the message. Perhaps that was the reason why he couldn't allow a second call. But he must have done that. After all, there's no way Ashiya would have been the ones to cut our single method of communication. He wasn't in the security room with the smoke went off, but one of the things he said was that he tried to do his part of removing the shutter, and that the system hadn't let him. That didn't actually happen, but Tsurupo told us that a similar effort was affecting Ashiya. Since Katai knew or lied about it without having experienced it, it follows he was probably the cause behind it. He didn't want the exit to open before the time ran. That means there was something he had to do before the time expired, and deleting the saved footage was likely part of that. When we were done, we left him alone in the security room, and that was the time we later learned footage had been erased. He'd used it to briefly reconnect the system and delete what he didn't want us to see. We looked through the crystal floor, but we didn't find Naomi. Then we separated into two groups to look through the other floors. Edina, Isla, Shiroya, and I took the elevator up to the 6th floor. On the 5th floor before Isla told us about her friend who heard the elevator. Since we'd left it on the 6th, and the other group had only heard it once, it had to be going down. What? I don't know. I don't know, let's try Naomi, I guess. Well, I don't even know what world we're in. Let's go A. It was Naomi who'd ended up trapped in the attic. When she appeared there, the elevator wasn't working. She must have eventually tried it again after Katai re-enabled it. From the 6th floor, the elevator went to the attic. Of course, we didn't hear that. Then, that Naomi used it to go all the way down. It was soon after when we found Naomi's first corpse in Hallway B Crystal Room. That was not the Naomi who took the elevator. I don't think that was the Naomi who taken the elevator though. The elevator moved after one Naomi had already appeared, and her set of keys was on the first dead body. That was likely the Naomi from our world. She appeared in front of the others and asked to talk to Katai privately. Later, the Naomi in the attic went down. But after we waited, Katai came back alone, saying Naomi hadn't wanted to come back. If she was still down there, we couldn't have let her keep escaping. Shiroi and I waited in front of the elevator, while the others went down to make sure we'd find her. Suddenly, we heard the elevator going up. We thought it was Naomi, but we didn't find anyone where the elevator would have stopped. The reason that my past self was the person who'd been boarding it. And while we were discussing what could have happened, Arcado came running. The Sekimeiya had vanished from the cabinet for the first time. Everyone was waiting near the stairs when we arrived. Shiroi and I saw an empty cabinet in the event room, but the priority was still Naomi. She had to be there. Making sure nobody could leave, room B4 was eventually looked into. That's where we found her corpse. Who killed Naomi B? Katai. Katai A. Just a guess. Oh no, it was probably Arcado actually. My bad. Someone coming from the future could have killed her, but I'm inclined to think it was actually Katai. It happened in this room where the Sekimeiya had been hidden, and in this world, Naomi didn't bring them there. That makes me think that it was Katai who did. It did make the most sense, because Naomi appeared from the 2nd floor. She had been watching the group from a distance, just in case she could gather information such as Katai's potential accomplices. Finally, she mustered the courage to confront them. She requested to talk to Katai privately. She represented Ashiya, so she couldn't let the others hear such bold accusation against one of their workers. If it was possible, an explanation existed. However, she knew that Katai had taken the Sekimeiya to the cabinet. Without speaking a word, they walked to the crystal floor. There, Naomi brought Katai to the room she'd seen him leave. The Sekimeiya had to be there. Naomi asked him to unlock all the cabinets and saw 2 of them lying inside. But as soon as I picked Katai, I thought, it can't be though, because he's not a killer. A coward, sure, and he did kind of cause Mia's death, but even though he's not really directly responsible for Mia's death, he's very guilty about it. And if being indirectly responsible for someone's death makes him this guilty and make him feel like he needs to redeem himself, he sure as shit wouldn't just murder someone in cold blood, right? Seems a bit incongruous behaviour to me. Anyway, the Sekimeiya had to be there. Naomi asked him to unlock all the cabinets and saw 2 of them lying inside. Raising her voice, she demanded an explanation while Katai kept quiet. He knew how bad the situation was. Naomi would bring about his doom. She would ruin everything. He didn't bother making flimsy excuses. He explained everything he'd done, hoping she would sympathise with him. He'd worked in Ashiya Tower all his life. He couldn't take it anymore. He only wanted to free himself from the life he'd lived. When she discarded Katai's justification, it was his voice that rose. There was no way he would let his life end like that. The truth was out, so Katai attempted to bribe. If they obtained the Sekimeiya, both of them could work together to trade it off. Immediately, Naomi refused. She was Ashiya's most trusted employee. The third step was a threat. With a calm voice, Katai let her pick between Ashiya or her own safety. He needed her to stay quiet, and starting immediately, she knew 2 real Sekimeiya existed. However, as Katai's words were dismissed again, he finally wavered. He'd been acting stern, but this was far from reality. Inwardly, Katai burned with rage towards Naomi. After a sudden step forward, Katai dashed at her. She had enough time to react and defend herself, but she was no match for him. After an abrupt scuffle, Katai dragged her to the wall and knocked her out. Before her death, Naomi let out a yell that only reached a single pair of ears outside the room. Her own. From above, Katai stared at Naomi's body, unaware that a cabinet's temperature wheel had been damaged. Seconds later, he finally checked her breathing. It was not. But all wasn't lost. Earlier, he turned off that room's camera. He'd known that he would have taken one of the Sekimeiya away eventually, so he preemptively disabled the video. But although he hadn't been recorded, he knew he was the only possible culprit. That was until he heard a sudden sound that forced him out of the room. Outside, he saw Atsuki's lone figure. Katai rapidly stepped aside. He couldn't be seen. However, Atsuki had just been recorded by the camera, so there was another potential culprit to build a narrative against. That's why he kept pushing it on us. Before he walked back up, Katai thought about what he'd had to say. He'd killed someone else, after all those years, and he could find another way out. When Naomi's body was found, Atsuki's eyes landed on the damaged wheel. It had stopped the temperature regulation, so the Sekimeiya made him travel to the past. However, the Sekimeiya lying in the neighbouring cabinet was still kept cold, with no world switch occurred. There, I travelled to the past for the first time, and 20 minutes later, I walked right back to where everyone had seen me disappear. The Sekimeiya turned grey, so we brought it to its cabinet in the event room, where it became white again. We heard a sound coming from outside. After all, someone else was still lurking within the tower. The Naomi who had taken the elevator down. The corpse had stopped our search, and we never looked into every room. But we couldn't let her escape, so we separated into two groups to look at both hallways. Katai, Edina, and Isla, and I looked at hallway A, while Shiroya, Akira, and Sai looked at hallway B, yet she wasn't found anywhere. When we finished, Sai reiterated his distrust for Katai. He didn't believe we could accept that Naomi had been found in the rooms he'd investigated. Sai waited to confirm it for himself, which led him to enter the storeroom. There, he found a Sekimeiya. Had it been taken already? He went to the event room and indeed it was gone from the cabinet. Who had hidden it in the storeroom? The question ate at me. And with that, we need to wrap this episode up here because we're out of time for today. I'll get this question wrong anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Although I think we've done pretty well in this episode. I think we've gotten most of the questions right this time, which is unusual, so mark this one down for the record books. This is the good episode. Don't look at the other ones, just look at this one. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.